Monday marks the 50th anniversary of the deadly shootings at Kent State University in Ohio, a key event during the Vietnam War era. 4 students were killed and 9 were wounded when National Guard troops opened fire during an anti-war protest. While much has changed in the 5 decades that have passed, for those who were there that day, the events of it remain fresh in their minds, worthy of reflection. May 4th, 1970.
It was a beautiful sunny morning, and I had an English class that I went to, and it was kind of surreal because there was this heavy military presence on campus.
One of you grab the shotgun.
Nearly 1,000 Ohio National Guardsmen were on the Kent State University campus, where John Cleary was nearing the end of his freshman year. The Guardsmen were called in after a mass of protesters vandalized downtown buildings and set fire to the university's ROTC building.
There was just a lot of people like me that were going to class or just curious as to what was going on, and there was probably in the thousands people just observing.
About 3,000 students had gathered on the Commons. Not all, but many were there to rally against the invasion of Cambodia, even though the protest had been banned. Some chanted or threw rocks when ordered to disperse.
Leave this area immediately.
When tear gas was ineffective, the Guard advanced, forcing demonstrators to retreat.
They did not fire. They got up and they began to march back up the hill. And just before I was going to go into Taylor Hall to get ready for my classes, I decided I'm going to get one more picture of them just as they reached the crest of the hill. They just suddenly turned and fired. Being naive and not realizing the danger I was in, I didn't duck for cover and got hit in the chest with a bullet, and it just knocked me down.
A student photographer captured that moment, which later captured the attention of the nation.
When you see the photos that actually convince people of the shooting, it wasn't done by professionals. It was done all by students.
John Philo is the vice president of photography at Viacom CBS. On May 4th, 1970, he was a Kent State senior also shooting pictures. Philo wanted to document the essence of the student protest, but instead found himself in the line of fire.
By the time I got the camera back around to my eye, it was over. The shooting was over, I never hit the ground. I never just stood there like a flat-footed idiot.
In shock?
In shock. Yeah, and you're looking and then you see this body, just behind you, down on the pavement, and the volume of blood is enormous.
It was something Philo knew had to be seen to be believed. So he took pictures.
And then you could see in the one frame the girl's running up, and then she kneels down beside the body. And I said, I got to get a. It was almost in profile. Let me get it more head on. And then she just let out with a scream, and you shot.
This photograph of Mary Vecchio kneeling over Jeffrey Miller, one of 4 students killed that day, would win Philo a Pulitzer Prize. What did you think when you saw the image that we now all know?
I was relieved because now I knew I actually took the picture.
It wasn't just in your mind.
It wasn't in my mind that I took the picture. I had that moment of doubt because it was such a shocking, the adrenaline rush of being shot at and surviving.
Philo's picture would also inspire a protest anthem, Ohio, performed by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Twin soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, for dead in Ohio.
After the Kent State shootings, more than 4 million students protested across the United States.
I think it's remembered in large part because so many students felt that it could have been them.
Thomas Grace was one of 9 wounded that day.
I was hit in the left heel, and it just took the right side of my left foot off.
Now a history professor, Grace wrote Kent State, Death and Dissent in the long 60s, which looked at what happened and why. He and others maintained that an audio recording, reanalyzed in 2007, contains evidence of an order to fire. 8 guardsmen were indicted in 1973 for their involvement, but the case was thrown out the following year. Grace is among a group that believes the federal investigation into the shootings should be reopened, even 50 years later.
So it helps us to understand better what took place there. And that there was some degree of foresight on the part of the National Guard in terms of what they did. The National Guard always maintained that they fired in defense of their lives.
Civil discourse and continued dialogue surrounding the Kent State shootings is in part what has motivated the annual commemorations of that day, including this year's virtual ceremony, capping off a year-long observance of the half-century gone by. And while May 4th, 1970 has personal meaning for those who were there, like John Cleary, they are the first to remind us it's a day we all can and should learn from.
I know I've had people, and they said, "You mean there were military on campus?" And they actually shot people, and they don't have a clue as to what happened on May 4th.
What is the danger of people not knowing what happened that day?
The danger is that it's forgotten and that it could conceivably happen again. I think to remember and honor the 4 students that were slain gives some weight and hopefully prohibits that kind of action in the future.
And that commemoration is so important to those who were there. You have to remember it took almost 20 years for the university to actually acknowledge that day. They do have a beautiful memorial that is there now. And Jeff, the words that are on part of it, inquire, learn, and reflect, again, are so important to all the men that we spoke with.
Sounds like good advice. Just horrifying still to see those pictures. And also to hear John so vividly talk about what happened back then. Dana, thank you very much.
The details, yeah.